Going on, everybody? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this. As you can see here on the video, on the screen, we've got a list of the Magnus Archives episodes, and I'm going to go through and rate the videos on, rate the episodes that, put them in the various tiers here, and kind of give a little mini review on each episode, my thoughts on them, and yeah, just rate them from S to D. Honestly, I don't know there's going to be a whole lot in the D. Most of them are probably going to be in A and B, probably a few C and a few S tier. I don't think there's any of them that are going to be down here because honestly, there's not an episode that I didn't really like. It's just other episodes that I like more than others, essentially. I've really enjoyed the Magnus Archives. Each episode seems to kind of get better and better. There are a few that are a little slower, in between there. But yeah, all of them have been great. And I'm looking forward to seeing where season 2 goes. So, but yeah, links will be down below in the description to the Rusty Quill Podcast YouTube channel, to the Magnus Archives playlist, and to the Rusty Quill Podcast website. So please do me a favor. If you've been enjoying the Magnus Archives, go to their YouTube channel, like all the videos they put out there that you've enjoyed, and hit that sub button on their channel. Those are the easiest ways that you can give them some free love and support. If you want to give them some extra love and support, check out their Patreon, check out their YouTube membership stuff, and check out their website, and find ways on there to give them some extra love and support. You can do the same with my channel if you'd like to. There's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer, so you can check those out if you would like to. Regardless, I just appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy day and schedule, come in and hang out, and check out the videos. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, consider leaving a like and a sub. It helps me and the channel grow. So with all that said, we're going to jump into this here. So the first episode was Anglerfish. And this really kind of set the tone, I feel like, for the whole show. The statement giver, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but the summary of it is essentially, he was going out partying on his way home, walking home, smoking a cigarette, and he sees kind of this person in the shadows trying to bum a cigarette off of him. And there have been a series of mysterious disappearances in the area. He gets kind of a strange feeling from it, and ends up leaving, only to find out other people from the party had disappeared. So episode 1, Anglerfish, I'll probably put this up here in A. I enjoyed this one. It, like I said, really kind of set the tone for the show, and really kind of started that whole mysterious vibe. So yeah, I would put Anglerfish here at the A tier. Episode 2, Do Not Open. This was the episode where I think it was a student of some sort. Again, I don't remember the statement giver's name. I'm bad with names if you guys haven't picked up on that by now. If it's not a name that I hear repeatedly and can attach something to it, I generally don't remember it. But he was definitely one of the smartest statement givers with how he pulled off some shenanigans in the story. But I think he was a student. He was in a coffee shop, and he was approached by someone that offered him, I think, 10 or 20,000 pounds to receive a package and keep it for an undetermined amount of time. So he agreed to it, took this money, and then a certain amount of time went by, I believe, and then he had a knock on his door, and a coffin was delivered to him. And I think he heard, noises and scratches and stuff coming from the coffin. It was a very intriguing episode. Joshua Gillespie, yeah. Mysterious John in his coffin, yeah. So it was a very intriguing episode, and it got to the point where he'd been given a key. I guess the episode, the coffin was chained and padlocked, and he had a key to open it, and he was tempted to open it several times. I think he even had some sleepwalking shenanigans that happened, where he found himself going to bed, and the next thing he knew, he was awake and almost opening it, and then he brilliantly kind of froze the key in a jug of water so he couldn't get to it, and kept it in his freezer, and then he basically just ignored it as best he could for several months. I want to say it was like 6 months, something like that, before the delivery service came, and to their surprise found him still alive, and they took the coffin. And I believe there was a bunch of screaming that was going on when he took the coffin. This is one of the more interesting episodes, in my opinion, because the statement giver was very smart in what he did, and he made it through, and really seems to be one of the only ones that kind of really like outsmarted whatever was happening at the time. But it also really left a bunch of like questions, like my theory of it is, right, like were he to unlock the coffin, it would have been like him in there, and he would have been snatched and like entombed in that coffin. I don't know, but it definitely, the delivery people, the Bleak and Hope or something like that. Again, I don't remember the name of the delivery service, but they were surprised to see him alive. So I will probably put this one in S tier. I really liked episode 2. Across the street. This is the episode with Graham and his table, where the lady from across the street. Yeah, John, the delivery guy, definitely seemed very surprised that he was still alive. I would assume the plan was to feed him or whatever. Yeah, something like that, But yeah, episode 3 is the episode where the statement giver lived across the street from Graham, and she kind of had this strange, I don't want to say fetish, but just habit of wanting to watch him. And she ended up, I guess, talking with him and kind of became friends with him at some point in time. And one night when he was walking her home, I think, she was like attacked and like fell down and had kind of a concussion. Graham called the EMTs and looked her over. She was fine. He brought her into her house, and that's the first time we hear about this table with this strange pattern, and she kind of became hypnotized with it. Yeah, Graham was a little weird. A lot of setup in episode 3. Yeah. But yeah, she like kind of sees this pattern or whatever, and feels a little strange. And then she ends up just kind of constantly watching Graham and, thinking things were going to happen or whatever. And then eventually one night she sees some kind of creature crawl into his window, and she calls the police. The police go there, and she sees Graham, and she recognizes that he's different, but no one else seems to. So it seems like Graham got body snatched or something. And then from that point on, Graham was kind of always watching her. So I don't know. This was a very interesting episode. And like she said, there was definitely a lot of some build up with this one. I'll probably put this one up in A. Page Turner, I'm trying to remember which one Page Turner was about. I think this was the first one where Jared Key gets what's the word I'm looking for? Where Jared Key gets introduced. Yeah, and it's where one of the Lightner books first gets introduced here too. But I'm trying to remember the full statement. I think someone was, going to a bookstore and happened to find this book that wasn't registered in the library or the bookstore that he was at, and ended up taking it home and was like entranced by the book, right? The one with the guy. Yeah, exactly. And it turns out to be one of the Lightner books. Yeah. And then, yeah, it turns out that, we get into Jared's mom with Mary Key, and he ends up going to like see her and visit her, and she had another Lightner book there, right? So, yeah, they're right, exactly. And that's the one where he gets the book and he burns it. So, this is definitely one of the earlier episodes, and this one sets up a lot as well. I'm probably going to put this one in B. It's a good episode, and it's one that, again, has a lot of like initial character introductions, but that's kind of, I feel like, all it really did. It introduced a lot of characters that we don't learn about more until like the future episodes. So yeah, There's that one. 5 thrown away. This is the one where the garbage truck dealers like keep finding mysterious stuff in the trash outside one of these neighbors' houses. They find like a bunch of dolls and various things like that, but it ends up they find a bunch of teeth in one episode. And one of the garbage workers like starts having like paranoia and PTSD and really needing to kind of find out what happens or what's going on in that house, right? And eventually that garbage worker ends up disappearing and they never see him again. But yeah, the last thing we know is that they find a garbage bag that's just full of teeth. And yeah, there doesn't really seem to be as much of a tie-in with anything else that's happened so far. I'll probably put this one might go in C actually, just because it was interesting, but there wasn't really a whole lot that really builds off from this episode at all so far. Right, exactly. That's the only other thing I could think of, is that might have something to do with the anatomy class people doing experiments and stuff. That would be my only question would be like, is it from the same house? And maybe they abducted the garbage truck worker and he's one of their victims. Oh. So Squirm. This is where we first get introduced to the maggots. This is the episode where the statement giver, he's going out, he's out, at some bar or club or something like that, and he sees this girl, and she's like looking over her shoulder, kind of paranoid it seems, and throughout the episode, he learns that she was like jumped by some woman in a red dress. This is where Jane Pinterest, yes, as the meme has come to be, I will keep calling her Jane Pinterest throughout the rest of the Magnus Archives if she ever returns. But yes, Jane Pinterest makes her first appearance. But yeah, she gets attacked by this woman, and so she's acting really strange. The guy ends up taking her back to his place anyway, sleeps with her, and she starts having pains and groans and strange stuff happening, and then she basically explodes, and a bunch of these maggots go everywhere, or in his apartment room. And I think he like sets the place on fire, if I remember correctly, something like that, to kill him or something. But we end up finding out later in episode 32 Hive that he becomes one of these worm hives. So this one I will probably put this in B. It's between, I think this is like a B plus A minus situation, honestly. It's a good episode, and it really sets up a lot of what happens in the later episodes of the first season. A lot of things refer back to these worms. And obviously Jane, she's one of the main characters. Right, yeah. So episode 7, The Piper. This was a fascinating episode. This was the war episode about the World War I writer, who saw something on the battlefield, heard this Piper music, and kind of went crazy. Should have died, but didn't die, and then wrote a bunch of books, and then came back and knew he was gonna die, and then eventually did die, during a battle. That's kind of really the gist of it, but fascinating episode. I'll probably put this one up in A. This is one of the more interesting ones, and there hasn't really been another episode that feels kind of similar to this, other than maybe Cheating Death. I don't know if this is supposed to be another episode that plays with the Avatar of Death or anything like that. I don't know, but this one, the Piper episode, feels very unique. Haven't really gotten back to the Piper yet. Yeah, exactly. The implication of the episode was that the author only died once the war ended. Right. Yeah. But he knew he was coming. He knew he was gonna die. He felt it. He was crying to the statement, or person who that was given the statement or whatever. So it was a fascinating episode. Burned Out. I'm trying to remember which one this is. Burned Out. Give me some help here, guys. Which episode was Burned Out? Because there are several episodes. Is this the one with the guy in the hospital where we first hear about the lightless flame and Jared Key's there? Right? Is that this one? Is that this episode? Or is it the tree? Hilltop Road? Okay, so this is the one with the electrician in the tree. Okay. So yeah, this was a pretty good episode too. I'll probably put this one up in A. This one we get to see the other perspective of in episode 19, Confession. Or maybe it's, yeah, episode 19. You know, an electrician is called in to do some work on a home. It seemed very kind of strange because he was doing work on a home without really necessarily knowing who owned it, and you know, never really met the owner or seemed to really kind of get authorized but you know, the story kind of goes into the home used to be like a halfway house where this guy was taking care of kids and orphans and things like that, and he was genuinely a good person. But eventually that house burned down and there was only one survivor. I forget the woman's name, but she was like one of the orphans there. She survived, but it ended up turning into like the electrician saw you know, the owner, and eventually like smelled something burning, took a look, and the guy, there was just like ashes on the ground, right? And you know, that was all that was left of him. And then he kind of felt like a burning sensation, left the house, and there was something about this tree that was getting at him. So he like pulled the tree down with his truck, and there was like a phylactery or a horcrux of some sort in this box underneath the tree, and it like broke. And then we hear in the statement at the end, when John's giving some of the facts, that this woman who had survived ended up dying. Yeah. Agnes Montague. Yeah. So, interesting episode. I really liked this episode and the idea of it. And then also because it's interesting that we see it from the other perspective later on. Episode 9, Father's Love. I'm going to put this up in S tier. I really liked Father's Love. I liked everything about this story. And it really also, again, started setting up Judas outside going to war with the tree. Yeah, for real. But also, it really kind of added a lot more mystery and intrigue from this episode. What happened to the mom? You know, the episode starts off with, you know, the child comes down, sees the door open. It's in the middle of the night, and the only thing left of her mom is this pendant with the eye closed, right? I think it's the eye closed pendant sitting on the table. And then the father, you know, seems to know what happened, but obviously doesn't tell the child anything because the child wouldn't understand. But our first mention of the Church of the Divine Host, yeah. But it seems like the father ended up going on like a hitman spree or something. Kept getting phone calls, and you know, he was a police officer, and eventually he quit his job as a police officer, and somehow he was still getting money and being able to support himself and his child. And he would go off in the night and do mysterious things, and he had this setup in his shed that was all locked off so that the kid couldn't get into it. But there was just a lot of, you know, interesting things happening and going on. Eventually the kid gets a phone call that, you know, phone rings and she answers it, and there's a strange man on the other end, and you know, she thinks it's someone from the police. She kind of overhears the conversation a little bit, and the father's like wanting to not do anything anymore and be done, but he kind of has to. It seems he's like forced into doing some kind of job. And the episode, you know, ends with you know, the kid looking down the street and seeing the lights going out, like popping, I think, even going down the street. And she goes into the shed, and the father's in the shed, and he's doing some kind of ritual, and there are all these hearts that are beating in this. in these jars, and he's doing some kind of ritual. And like, just as some kind of like creature comes up behind the kid, father finishes the ritual, and then this entity disappears, and then he's framed essentially for, or I don't know if it's necessarily framed, because maybe he did do all these murders, but he's essentially, sent to jail because he killed all these people, and not too long after he was in jail, he ends up getting brutally murdered himself. So it was a very fascinating episode that introduces the Church of the Divine Host, and also some other kind of entity of some sort. So I'm hoping we'll get some more tie-ins with that one. Honestly, after a second listen to that episode, I'm along with you. I still have no idea if her dad was working with the church or hunting them down. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like he was acting as like a hitman for someone. That's what it seemed like. But I don't know. Vampire Killer. This one I'll probably put into A. This was a very unique episode where, this child and his brother are orphaned, and I believe they're orphaned, right? And they're taken in by someone. They like live on the street for a while. They're taken in by someone, and he notices some strange occurrences. He eventually notices that this person doesn't, move their mouth when they speak. They seem, to be compelled to do things that this person does or asks them to do, etc. And this, seemingly woman takes them home, sets them up in their bed. The house is kind of strange, and in the middle of the night, he wakes up, goes into his brother's room to see how they're doing. I think hears this woman coming, hides under the bed, and essentially lays under there while witnessing his brother's murder to this vampire thing, and eventually ended up, killing it. So yeah. And this happens when he's a kid. So at first he thinks it's some kind of, potential delusion, or, something weird happened. But then eventually he finds, another vampire doing something similar to another person, drags this woman home. He ends up kind of getting like a sense for them and seeing them for what they are. And so he recognizes a similar pattern and a similar feeling. And he sees this vampire, taking this drunk woman home, and he ends up, interfering and interceding, keeps her from being killed, almost gets killed himself, but the woman ends up helping him out, and they end up dispatching the vampire, etc. So it's a very interesting story, and another kind of unique one. And I also really kind of like the uniqueness of the vampires to this story. They're not like the common vampires you see in story or media. They are like, they look like humans, but they're not humans at all. They don't speak. They seem to have some kind of form of hypnosis, and they have like these tongues that like pierce people, and they almost kind of seem parasitic or of some sort, and they kind of absorb people's blood through that. So very interesting. Good episode. Episode 11, Dreamer. This is the one where the guy, has dreams, and he goes into like the upside down, essentially, to give a Stranger Things term, and he's able to see these tendrils going to people, and those people, he sees in real life, and they eventually die, essentially. And it ends with him going into the Magnus Archives and seeing Gertrude with a bunch of tendrils either going to her or coming off of her with like red light, like red orbs going to her or coming off of her. So that's what initially kind of like made me like suspect of Gertrude, because she kind of like, at this time, she had disappeared suddenly. No one knew what really happened to her. So I was thinking that there was more going on with her, that maybe she was involved in some more of these things. But I really like this episode. I'm going to give this one an A as well. I haven't really had more tie-ins with that one either, other than I think Jane's Statement, the episode where we get Jane's Statement. There's a small little tidbit where, she's trying to sell something to someone, and this guy walks up to her and looks at her and sees she sees like a sadness in his face and then fear, because he kind of sees what happens to her and what she becomes. So I think that's like the only tie-in we've had so far. If it is him, I think it is, right? Julio, I think was his name. Was the name of the statement giver, if I'm remembering correctly. So, but yeah, that was a good one. Episode 12, First Aid. I think First Aid is the one that I was thinking of before, where Jared Key shows up again, and this is the one that takes place in the hospital from the nurse's perspective with the burn victims. This was an interesting one because they talk about the lightless flame, and it's almost like some kind of religion, and we see, you know, the open eye tattoos on Jared and with his lighter, and it almost seems like, I don't know if Jared, it seems like Jared is trying to prevent someone from being possessed, maybe. I don't know if he's trying to prevent someone from being possessed, or if he purposely like put a demon in someone so it could be killed. Like one of those two things. I don't know. But yeah, essentially the story is there's like these burn victims that are like kind of comatose. They come into the hospital. This nurse is, you know, working on them. And then strange occurrences start happening. There's like water boiling in the vending machines. People like disappear from the hospital, almost like she's brought into like another dimension or something like that. And then like, yeah, Jared Key was there. He was burned, but ends up waking up. And then like, yeah, does some kind of ritual to, I don't know, exorcise the demon or something. But we hear, you know, this person mumbling some phrases, and it was something about a lightless flame. I don't remember exactly what it was. I don't remember the exact phrase, but it was something about the lightless flame. But this one I'm going to put in A tier as well. And honestly, I think most of them are probably going to be, like I said, A or B tier as we're going through here. Episode 13 alone. This is the statement. This is the first time we hear someone other than Jonathan Sims talk, really, I think. Statement giver here talks about her. This is the first introduction of the Lucas family. Better the beholding than the lightless flame. Yeah, something along that. Yeah. But yeah, we get introduced to the Lucas family in this. The statement giver was engaged to someone from the Lucas family. I don't remember his name. I want to say Peter, but maybe I'm incorrect. Again, I'm terrible with names. But so she has this, you know, great relationship with this person. I forget how. Evan, that's what it was. Evan. Peter was a ship captain. That's what it was. I was getting the names confused. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, she had this great relationship with this person. I forget how he died, but essentially, she goes to the funeral, and Peter. Well, I guess it is technically Peter's family too, but Evan's family's there, and they seem to not like her at all. They seem to. The way the episode took place is it almost seems like they feel like she stole them from him. You know, they stole him from the family or something like that. And like, I don't know, they're all like very strange and very kind of emotionless and cold to her, and they don't really care that she's there. And eventually they basically kind of just tell her to leave. And like the head of the family that tells her to leave was like a very strange looking man of some sort. So yeah, she ends up leaving, and then she I feel like Evan died from a heart condition. It might have been. He might have had a heart attack or something like that. But yeah, something happened to him. And so she's leaving the funeral, and she crashes her car in like a ditch or a pole or something like that. And so she ends up like getting out and walking. She gets you know, encompassed by this fog, and it ends up leading her to this graveyard. And in this graveyard there's like a mausoleum, and the doors are shut, and you know, she's wandering around there, and various things happen. And then the next time she comes back to the mausoleum, the doors are open, and it seems to like open up into almost like another dimension. This episode had a very much like an eldritch horror Bloodborne kind of feel of being like multiple layers of reality, and you know, what is real, what's not real. And this dimension that opened up would have been like this dimension of like, maybe that was just her and her for her alone. If she went in there, she would have been alone forever, and she kept getting the sense of being alone. But yeah, eventually she like runs from it and comes out of it, and ends up getting hit by a car, which actually the way it was read was actually kind of funny. I don't know, it gave me a chuckle. She like runs out of this fog, and all of a sudden, bam, she gets hit by a car. And then the EMTs come and take care of her, and then she goes and gives her statement. So I'm gonna give this one an A as well. Piecemeal, this is the one where the criminal goes to a witch to have someone essentially killed, but he's not happy with how long it's taking. Personally, episode 14 is an S tier, just a classic Baba Yaga story. Evan was the one who helped her out too. Yeah, he like told her to run and kind of told her where to go. But yeah, so Piecemeal, yeah, this is the episode where, like I said, this criminal person you know, goes to a witch, puts a curse on someone, seemingly someone that he's wanting to have killed, who was a business partner of him, and like cheated him out of something, some money or deal. Yeah, this is the first episode where we hear about Salesa. Yeah. And he's the one who was supposed to be killed, right? And then this criminal guy ends up killing him, and in doing so, like, takes the curse onto himself, and he starts getting packages of like body parts, and then those body parts, like, various occurrences start happening where he loses those body parts. So yeah, this was a very interesting episode as well. Other than one of the more recent episodes, Lost and Found, I don't think there's been a whole lot of other tie-ins with it. It was some guy that worked for Salesa. Okay, I thought it was him himself. But I'll give this one an A as well. This was an interesting episode. It was definitely very creepy, in the fact that it's like you're seeing these body parts, and then you start having random occurrences where those body parts get taken from you. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It was just very creepy. Lost John's Cave. This is going to be an S tier one for me. Even though, like, the idea of cave diving and being like stuck in caves and darkness is one of my, you know, biggest fears. I really liked this episode. Essentially, it was basically an episode of a cave diving incident that seemed to have gone wrong. This woman and her sister are cave divers. They go down into a series of caves there they haven't really necessarily explored before, and they end up getting separated. At least that's what the statement giver tells us. I think the most unique thing about this statement is it seems like, you know, from the end where John is giving us the facts, that her entire story potentially is a lie. It's either a lie or her memory's been altered, or yeah, it's either a lie or her memory's been altered, one or the other. And so there's that whole mystery of that. But it was a very fascinating story in general. Just again, the idea of this statement giver's entire story can be like corroborated as false, where seen a pattern of these entities that seem to mess with people's memory. Yeah. I mean, she remembers going in there with her sister, and then supposedly they got separated, and like the walls were like closing in behind her and broke them off, and eventually, you know, she lost track of her sister and she just had to escape on her own. And you know, she sees this like hand of light with like this candle in it that kind of like guides her out. You know, that was like basically what I kind of the overall summary of her statement was. But then we find in the facts that were given by John that there was a recording from her dive, and we hear her saying, "Take her, not me," with like ominous footsteps happening down in there. there's definitely a lot more happening down in the cave. I'm wondering if this is also something to do with the Church of the Divine Host or whatever. Because there seem to kind of be some kind of, religious sacrificial connotations maybe going on with this. But yeah, this one was very fascinating. Arachnophobia. This is where we also kind of get introduced to the worms again briefly at the beginning. But this entire story is basically about a guy who, as a kid, sees a weird spider in some kind of like fallen tree and ends up it's like the spider's made a nest in like this rotting tree, and he ends up like falling and breaking open like this sack of spiders that thousands of them just start crawling all over him, and he gets this like fear of bugs and spiders, like a severe fear of bugs and spiders, to the point where like he had to move places because he would see a spider and it would just freak him out so much, kind of thing. Might be biased for episode 16, right? But then he starts seeing like the spectral version of the spider that just appearing in his apartment complex, or not his apartment complex, but in his apartment at random times and places. And it's interesting that it started happening after he saw some of the worms. I don't know if there's a connection between those two or not. And I'm also, like I brought up in the episode itself, I was wondering if the apartment he moved into when he saw the worms and this started happening was the same apartment from that episode Squirm, where the original guy lived, where he brought home the woman and she, exploded and the worms went everywhere. If that was the same apartment, and then it had just been like fixed up and he moved in there and that's why he saw the worms, I don't know. It also seemed to weirdly compel him to kill it. Yeah. And yeah, it like seemed to have some kind of like forced compulsion, almost like he was hypnotized and he had to keep killing the spider over and over and over again. Like every time he did it, I don't know, he would like lose something of himself. He would like lose some of his memory. And every time he did it, he like the compulsion to do it more would happen to him. We also, of course, get introduced to Major Tom. I believe it's Major Tom, the cat name. Pivotal character in the Magnus Archives series. We can't forget to mention him. It was a different apartment. Okay. I'll give this personally a B tier for me. It was an interesting episode. But it didn't, other than the worms having kind of a mention, doesn't really seem to have much more of a bigger tie-in than that. Wonder where I've heard that elsewhere in this series. Yeah. The Bone Turner's Tale, episode 17. This one's gonna get probably an S tier for me as well. Some of these might change as we go through this, but I'm gonna give this one an S tier as well. I really like this episode. Who's gonna say Major Tom's a real one? Refused to die. Yeah, exactly. He was like, nope, I ain't going after these things. I'm out, brother. And he ended up leaving. He was like, I'm out of here. I'm gonna fend for myself. But yeah, Bone Turner's Tale. This is the story. Again, someone going into like a bookstore. We get another Leitner book, a Leitner collection book, I should say. I believe this is when the Leitner collection, right? His name showed up in this one again, I believe. But yeah, the statement giver finds another book in here. I believe he runs a bookstore, if I remember correctly, in this episode. And like his best childhood friend kind of comes back into his life and then sees this book and has just like this overwhelming compulsion to have this book. And I think he even like steals it from the statement giver, or maybe he buys it. I don't remember if he steals it or he buys it. But once he does this, like strange things start happening to like his family. Like his mom comes, the statement giver's childhood friend's mother goes to the statement giver's house and like slaps him or spits in his face or something like that, because she blames him for giving him this book and it's changed him in these weird ways. And she's got like this like arm brace or cast on. It seems like, you know, he's experimenting on his mom, and the statement giver starts seeing like rats and other animals that are like somehow alive but twisted in these weird shapes. He was a librarian. Okay. Yeah, Jared Hopsworth. Yeah. Isn't the one where the dude punches Jared in the chest and they're really, yeah, right. Yeah. So, but yeah, and eventually it turns into like him getting that book back. But, one night, you know, it seems like there was a break into the library, and, Jared Hopsworth, no, that the Jared's the statement giver, I think, right? Yeah, Jared's the statement giver. I'm trying to remember what the name was for the guy that turned into the flesh monster. But yeah, we ended up seeing him as like a creature, the silhouette, you know, and he's trying to get the book back, and the statement giver, I think it was Jared, right? Yeah. No, Jared was the bully. Oh, okay, it was the bully. Librarian was the statement. Right. Yeah, he's the flesh monster. Right. Again, bad with names. But so the statement giver has this overwhelming compulsion to like punch him, and like his hand gets stuck in him, and like, yeah, he's just this like mangled abomination of a creature. It makes me wonder, right? Like eventually in a future episode, you know, I believe it's Distortion, Sasha ends up finding another thing similar where it looks human, but it actually through like some kind of, you know, weird distorted glass, she sees what this creature really looks like. I wonder if Jared and Michael are like similar entities with this like weird flesh abomination creature. But I really like this episode. It was a good body horror episode. It was a good story. So right, all the books start bleeding. Yeah, it was a creepy one. The Man Upstairs. Well, I'd give this one a B. Although this was a good episode, but it wasn't anything crazy. This basically is an episode. The statement giver moves into a new apartment, and as he's moving in, there's a guy upstairs in the balcony smoking. He's like, his face is kind of obscured with this hood, and he doesn't really have any problems with the neighbors for a while. And then after a certain time, he starts, you know, hearing this hammering sensation. There's always this strange odor that seems to kind of like waft into his apartment every now and then. But yeah, eventually they keep, you know, he keeps getting this hammering noise over and over and over again. And he tries to go up there and complain. And it definitely seems like the person living in the apartment is something's wrong with him. They're like bodies like deformed and disfigured in some kind of ways. But then eventually, right, like he starts having like a leak problem, and he calls a plumber. I believe it was either a plumber or electrician, one or the other. He was either having some kind of electrical problem or was having a plumbing problem, and he calls someone to take care of it. And the person like pokes the roof, and then all of this like disgusting juice just like spills out all over him with this rancid, rotten smell. And yeah, the poor plumber, for real. So he goes up, kicks open the door, and it's just an utter darkness. And there's like various kinds of like rotting meat that's just staked to the walls everywhere. And the body of the apartment of whoever lived there, I think he sees them dead, if I remember correctly. But then he sees like this like flesh creature, this like mound of like flesh with multiple eyes on it, like moving around, and then all of a sudden it kind of like disappears. So it was a very interesting story. It was a very disgusting story. I would definitely like burn my clothes and take a bath in bleach after that and move. You know what I'm saying? Like I would have to be like disinfected after that. That was that was a gross one. He was only 2 weeks from retirement. Yeah. So 19 and 20, this was a 2-parter episode. So I'm going to put both of these up here in S tier because I really liked both of these episodes. We get introduced. I'm going to talk about both of them together. We get introduced to the Church of the Divine Host again, but we see from a different perspective what happened in episode 8, Burnt Out. There was a priest that was summoned to that house where the electrician was, and he pulled down the tree. The priest was summoned there to do an exorcism, and as he's wandering through the house, sorry for that interruption there. Anyway, as I was saying, so yeah, this is a another perspective from the episode Burnt Out. So the priest is going in there, checking out the house, and starts feeling this actually there's actually more to the story that happened beforehand. So there was a young girl that was having some trouble, and I think he asked her, or she asked him to go to the house to check it out or something like that. I don't remember those exact details about the beginning part, but he peels down the walls, and there was writing on the walls, if I remember correctly. And then from then on, he didn't feel right. He just didn't feel right. There was something going on with him, and his faith felt strange, and he felt like he wasn't connected to God or something like that anymore. And so he goes to do another exorcism at this house, and he starts feeling this burning sensation. So he starts praying, because he feels like he's gonna combust and be burnt to death. And then he hears, essentially, I don't remember the exact words, but he hears that he's marked, essentially. He hears something that says that this one's not for you, or something along those lines. And then the burning sensation starts to go away. And so this is kind of the first interaction, it seems like, between different entities or creatures of some sort, some kind of supernatural beings. And there seems to be potentially some kind of relationship between them in some way, some kind of maybe pecking order, or understanding that certain people or things are marked and they can't be messed with. And maybe it has to do with, because at this point, right, the electrician hadn't pulled down the tree yet and opened the phylactery that killed the girl. So maybe, the girl was still, marking people to be burned, and then another entity was like, hey, back off. This one's for me. So she stopped. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. All these entities definitely aren't working together. So that was a very fascinating aspect of that episode. And then that ties into the second part, the desecrated host. Well, I think actually the end of confession, right? He was confessing to another priest about what was going on with him, because he'd been sick for a long time, and he was confessing to another priest. And it turns out the priest that he was confessing to wasn't really the priest. It was someone else, some other entity, something, and it seemed to kind of push and egg him on even more. Which then led into the other episode of Desecrated Host, where he has he's essentially, it looks like he murdered 3 people, and I don't know if he consumed or ate their flesh. I think that was the case, right? But through the story, he ends up finding this church, and there's all these pews set up, and people are in this church, and he sees this strange priest, bishop, I forget what they call it in the episode, who's doing a sermon. And he ends up getting involved in the sermon and going up and talking, and there's these weird bell tones that ring out from their throat, and they're going through the whole process of the sacrament. I believe it's a sacrament, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole process of drinking the blood of Christ and drinking or eating of the flesh of Christ, that whole process. And once it's done, and he ends up coming to, it seems like it was a hallucination, and there are like bodies of people that have been like tortured and mutilated, and he might have been eating some human remains. So it was a very fascinating episode. Both of them are very fascinating. And so far it's the only two-parter that we've had. So episode 21, Freefall, I'll put this in B. This was an interesting episode, and it introduced kind of another Eldritch horror, but the episode is essentially about a guy who likes to skydive, and he gets a job skydiving, is becoming a skydive instructor. The statement giver is his mom, because he has disappeared, and during one of his skydives there's like an old man that, you know, speaks some kind of words to him about the great blue sky, and then it like makes him feel weird. He ends up jumping out of the plane and then feels like he's just trapped in like the sky dimension for days, for either hours or days, and eventually ends up coming out and getting a parachute. And the lead instructor that was on the plane with him says that, you know, he was up there for a lot longer than he should have been, etc. And then I think eventually he goes, he like quits that job and he moves back home with his mom, and is in like this real kind of depressed state for a long time, and eventually starts breaking out of it. He and his mom go to have like a picnic, and they walk up a hill, and he sees something and like pushes his mom away, and then he ends up like vanishing, seemingly being devoured by like some kind of sky entity. Maybe it might have been the Fairchilds. It might have been something along those lines. So, but this was an interesting episode. It seemed like it introduced some kind of new eldritch entity or being. That, and just the idea of the sky essentially opening up and swallowing you is pretty terrifying. But this didn't really build up on anything else other than that. So, episode 22, Colony. I'm trying to remember exactly which one this one is. Distortion is the one where Michael comes in. I'm trying to think of which one. Colony had to do with the worms again. Is this the one where Martin first, you know, goes into that basement and gets chased away? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna give this an S tier one too. I like this episode. I think this is the first episode where we get introduced to Martin, actually, and he gives his full statement. And Martin's the GOAT. Martin's an OG. You know, so he's following up on some of the statements with Jane Pinterest. Yes. And so he goes into like a basement of this building. He ends up like breaking in to like investigate this area, and ends up seeing her down underneath her. He startles her because like she's just kind of seems to have been there like incubating or something like that, and then he does something and startles her. He drops his phone, and then she basically like tracks him to his home and tries to essentially infest him, turn him into another hive, potentially, who knows. But he ends up, you know, going under siege at his home. There had been a series of episodes where it was kind of mentioned subtly in the background, you know, that John was trying to get Martin to do things, but he disappeared, and supposedly had been calling in or texting them that he'd been sick for a few weeks. And it turns out that Jane Pinterest, yes, Jane Pinterest, had been texting the whole time, and he had been essentially just trapped in his house, you know, under siege from these worms trying to get him. And he basically held out for, I think, 13 days, 14 days, something like that. He barricaded himself in, rationed his food and water and stuff like that, and held out and eventually escaped. And that's when we start seeing worms invading the actual Magnus Archives Institute on a regular basis. So that was a good episode, and this starts kind of the like final arc of season 1. So yeah, that was a good one. Schwarzwald, I'm gonna give this one an A. I like this episode because this was a very this was a world building, you know, universe building episode. This gets into potentially the origins of the Leitner books. Um, this statement is from in like the 1800s. The statement giver's niece or nephew is like sick, and so they go spend the winter there with him. And they're exploring the grounds. Right. So he's like exploring the grounds and eventually finds like this underground, chamber, catacomb, whatever, that leads down into like maybe an underground cemetery. There's like this gravekeeper that he talks to that kind of keeps appearing and disappearing. But eventually he goes down underneath there and finds this like emerald or jade and encrusted or not encrusted, but like tomb of some sort. What's the word? Casket. Like this emerald or jade casket, I think. It was either a casket or may have just been like a pillar or an obelisk. But yeah, and there were like rotting books everywhere, but this is where we first initially get, a look at the Leitner book, one of the Leitner collection books. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we get a mention of Jonah Magnus, who potentially was one of the founders or starting members of the Magnus Archives. But yeah, the statement giver takes this book back and starts reading through it, and isn't really, I think, able to make necessarily a ton of progress in it. But the whole statement of this is essentially a letter to Jonah Magnus, because Jonah Magnus has like started this collection of oddities and is kind of into the occult and is an explorer of things like that. So he wants to essentially get this book back to him so he can take a look at it and make more sense of it. And at one point in time, this like gravekeeper, he when he's fleeing from this tomb, he runs into the gravekeeper, knocks him down, and like this gravekeeper seemingly, he has no eyes, and it seems like he's getting ready to attack him, and then like seemingly like looks up like he was commanded to do something and then disappears. So yeah, interesting episode. It was much more of like a world building episode, a lore building episode, tying into the fact that this setting in these books seem to have a deep history. Also, they found like a coin and an inscription of a name. I forget what the name was in there, but the coin was dated back to like the 12th century or the 11th century, and may have been like from the facts at the end that John's giving, may have been a relative to some kind of baron who may have been a bastard child, and potentially got into witchcraft because he was a bastard child or something like that. So could be some kind of, maybe vampire or like Dracula-esque kind of creature or entity. It seems to have that kind of feel. It's kind of, person who may have been around for 600 years that has been entombed in this, casket. Maybe he was the original person that wrote these books. Maybe the Leitner collection books are even older than that. Maybe they have some kind of like, maybe the Leitner books are some kind of like actual like fundamental element of the world and reality or something like that. Who knows? Maybe he got him through the witchcraft stuff. I don't know. But this was a very interesting episode. Strange music. I'm going to give this one a B. This was an interesting one. This is essentially one where the statement giver's relative died and is going through their attic, and they find an old calliope and like a trunk with this doll. It's a very creepy doll, and the relative that passed away was a member of like a Russian circus act. And it seems like if someone plays this music the right way, it almost seems like how do I want to put this? The person playing the music, if they play it a right way, they can like curse other people into being turned into dolls. That's essentially what seemed like it happened in this one. Now I might actually move this one down to C. I thought this was an interesting one, but it really didn't necessarily do a ton for me overall, and it didn't really seem to have any kind of overall connection to anything. The only other thing we kind of really find at the end of this is that the calliope and I think the trunk that the doll might have been in are archived in the Magnus Institute storage. So definitely answers is yeah, that's right. In the previous one, yeah, there were ancestors of Mary Key and Jared Key. So like Jared Key's like lineage comes from those people. Episode 25, Growing Dark. Which one was this? I'm trying to remember this one. Oh, I think this is the one where the statement giver, his girlfriend's roommate, ends up like joining a cult essentially. Like she was a religious person. The boyfriend's girlfriend's roommate was a very religious person, and her mother died, and she went into a deep depression and kind of lost her faith, but then ended up becoming, I think, a part of the Church of the Divine Host, and started trying to talk to the statement giver's girlfriend into joining it. And there was like this creepy moment where statement giver's girlfriend's roommate, I'm saying it this way because I don't remember their names. I should probably bring up the transcript just so I can say their actual names. But so yeah, the statement giver's girlfriend's roommate like makes dinner, and they're in the dark, and like throughout the story it seems like the statement giver's, you know, girlfriend's roommate, she keeps turning she keeps taking the bulbs, not necessarily out, but turning them enough so that they're loose, so that when you turn the light switch on, nothing happens, right? But she ends up like making this dinner for the girlfriend, and you don't ever see what the girlfriend's eating. It's just described as something like strange and kind of fleshy, I think, from what I remember. It made me think that she was eating like some of the maggots, right? The worms. But it was definitely strange, and it seemed like she was trying to get the girlfriend to maybe join, but she was also letting her know that she was going to move away. So the boyfriend, the statement giver, gets pissed off, goes to confront the girlfriend's roommate at this like church that he goes into that's kind of like boarded up. He ends up opening it up and getting in there, and he gets like trapped in this like utter darkness. And his torch, flashlight, you know, stops working. He drops his cell phone, and he's like kind of like feel his way through there to try to find the exit. And throughout the whole time, there's like this like weird singing going on. Eventually, he feels like some kind of like grate, like fingers coming out of it after him. Then eventually, he finds his cell phone, and it gives off enough light for him to get out of there. Yeah, hello, darkness, my old friend. Yeah, exactly. So it was a very strange episode, but a very interesting one. I'll give this one a B. And it also seems to tie into the Church of the Divine Host. One of the interesting things about it was at the very end, John gives some kind of statement that something about the person that owned the church also owned something in like the farthest part of like Norway, right, where there's basically no sun and is almost always in darkness. And I feel like that's a hint or foreshadowing for something more in the future. And I also wonder if it ties in something with the Lucas family eventually in the future, because there's a future episode where it seems like the Bosun's Call, where the Lucas family might be into something like they're into things on a more global scale. Maxwell Reiner, yeah. So Tom seems very weird. Yeah. Episode 26, Distortion. S tier episode. This is where Sasha kind of takes control in this episode. This is really from her perspective, and we get introduced to Michael, who is some kind of potentially a flesh abomination. He looks like a regular person, but through like this distorted glass window, Sasha sees him for what he really is. He recognizes it. She kind of follows him around a little bit, and basically he invites her to have a cup of coffee with him, right? He just goes into like a coffee shop. She kind of follows him there, and then, you know, eventually goes in. she sits down and they have a conversation. And he basically says that someone's trying to kill John, and that it's Jane Pinterest, and he can help them out if they need to. Eventually, Sasha agrees to get his help. He takes her to some kind of old abandoned house where the guy from the episode Squirm, I don't remember his name, is essentially another, maggot hive. He's like got holes all in him and is like webbed to like the wall, and there's all these maggots, coming out of him. And Michael basically, puts her in a situation where she has to defend herself, and she finds out that essentially using CO2 kills them. So, and he prevents a worm that she didn't realize had burrowed into her. He, essentially extracted from her, so she's not harmed. So the fascinating thing about this episode is it definitely seems like there are entities that are working against each other for their own self-interest, potentially. So, you don't need to feel bad. It's my second time through. I don't remember most of Dave McGear's names either. Yeah. But yeah, this was a very fascinating episode, in my opinion, because again, it shows that these entities aren't like a cohesive group. They are potentially working against each other, but potentially to the demise of other ones. What that means, I don't know. I had in the video, I had almost equated it to like the great game that's happening in Warhammer 40k with the Chaos Gods, where they're locked in this eternal struggle of power, and basically the material world and the warp are their playground, and they're just constantly warring with each other because they have nothing else really to do. So it makes me wonder if something like that's happening. Episode 27, A Sturdy Lock. I'm gonna give this one. This is like B+ to A. This was an interesting episode. We have an old guy whose family kind of ends up moving out after his wife dies. He's living alone, I believe, and he starts having what seems to be break-ins. Like people, like he's in his room, and it seems like someone's like trying the door lock to get into his room. And the first time it happens, he like jumps to the door and like grips it and holds it shut as best he can. Eventually it stops. I don't know how he's able to go back to sleep. I wouldn't be able to sleep in a situation like that. But yeah, so and these occurrences keep happening. He keeps calling the police. The police have nothing to go on. They think he's just kind of an old man that's losing his mind, and maybe that is the case, who knows. But eventually, he finds a key to this door and locks it, and this entity keeps trying harder and harder and harder to break in, and after he locks it, not able to get in. But eventually he comes to the realization that the door, well, I don't think he came to the realization. I think it's actually in John's statement at the end. It's found out from the pictures that I think Sasha or Martin might have taken as the follow-up investigation. They show that the doorknob to his room has no lock, so he could not have locked it. So what does that mean? Yeah, another guy under siege, exactly. So interesting episode. Right, yeah, this is another one that seems to be its own self-contained episode. Skin Tight, I'm gonna put this up in A. I like this episode. This was another one that introduces another fan favorite character, seemingly. I can't remember her name, but her and John seem like they definitely need to get a room and work out some of that sexual tension. That's what it seemed like. I'm just saying. But yeah, she's like a supernatural reporter. Melanie King, right? Melanie King, isn't that her name? Yes, Melanie King. So yeah, she's like a supernatural, like ghost hunter reporter. She's got like a TV show, it seems, or some kind of show. So she feels like she's superior to the Magnus Archives, and what she does is more legit, and hates having to go there to give this because no one else believes them, and feels like the Magnus Archives are like archaic, etc. Blah blah blah. But so she's gives her statement, and they're going to like some kind of old abandoned hospital to spend the night there to get some recordings, and the normal one of the normal crew members can't come, so they bring someone else in, and this girl is acting very strange, smokes a lot, has a weird smell to her. And throughout the process of the night, Melanie is trying to they're like taking shifts after they set up their equipment to kind of like capture what was ever going to go on there. Also, the girl, whatever she was, who filled the camera person, was the previous victim. Yeah. So it could just be the anglerfish itself, the anglerfish entity. Who knows? Maybe it's, there's definitely a theme, it seems, of body snatchers. So yeah. But anyway, so they set up the equipment. They're taking sleeping shifts. And when Melanie's trying to go to sleep, this woman disappears. She follows her into another room and the whole time, this photographer, camera person, this new woman to the crew, is like very paranoid of the surroundings. Didn't realize that this was the place they were going to. Wasn't happy about going there. Seemed like there was something off about them actually going there, etc. So, she follows the camera woman to another room, and she seems to be talking to some kind of entity. There's like an old ghost story, wives' tale kind of thing about this gray maiden that has been in the hospital that heals people miraculously or something like that. So that could also indicate that potentially some of these entities aren't necessarily out to hurt people. They could actually be helping people potentially, if that is to be believed. But it seems like whatever entity this camera woman was trespassing on their territory. Again, seeming like there's some kind of hierarchy of entities going on. And it's revealed that like she's wearing some kind of skin suit because like the skin in her arm was like peeled back. And she like reattaches the skin to her hand. And Melanie King like sees this and records this. So yeah. That was really the most fascinating thing about this. Again, more world building and lore building, that there seems to be some kind of hierarchy to entities, and there seems to be some kind of like protocol and procedure of interacting with them and not messing with other people's territories. And so this camera woman was like trying to apologize and explain that she didn't mean to be here. She didn't realize that she was going to be here and trespassing, yada yada, and the other entity wasn't having it. So I was feeling she was talking to the gray maiden, whatever it was, threw her across the room. Yeah, it was very interesting. Very interesting. Cheating Death. I'm going to give this one another A. This was a very fascinating episode too. It starts out that the statement giver seems like he's just telling a folk story, but it ends up being a story of him, how he was like a Revolutionary War, soldier, got injured in the Battle of Bunker Hill and ran away. Ended up finding some kind of, storage shed of some sort, and was basically laying in there dying, and found some kind of avatar of death essentially in there. And they ended up playing a game, some kind of game, card game or something like that. I don't remember what it was called, but he ends up cheating death, and in so doing gets turned into like this avatar of death. And the previous avatar of death was like brought back, and it turns out to be some kind of like, I forget how he described him. I think he said it was like some kind of Asian man, maybe a monk of some sort. I don't remember, but definitely seemed like he was from a long ago era. And so the story keeps going on, and eventually someone, he basically acts as like the avatar of death, going around killing people who deserve to be killed, some people who don't deserve to be killed. And it's, the question I brought up is why, but I guess when you're the avatar of death and you don't have anything else to do, I mean, maybe that's just what you do. I don't know. But eventually someone cheats him out of a game. And so he's like in this half state, half alive, half dead. He seems to be immortal. He like stabs himself in the hand, and the wound like heals itself up. He seems to not be able to die, but he also doesn't really be able to seem to like experience much in life. He's not able to like really eat or drink, or he doesn't, I don't remember if it's that he doesn't like taste anything, or eating and drinking and things like make him sick. Like he's not really able to it's like he's alive, but he's not really able to experience life, kind of a thing. So interesting episode. Killing floor. This was a super creepy one. This is probably, for me, like the creepiest one overall. I'm gonna give this one a B. I do like this episode, but I think it made him sick. Yeah, but it was just a very, I don't know, I guess it was kind of a grotesque episode. This is basically the episode where this butcher, you know, he works at a butcher shop, or a slaughterhouse, I should say, and his job is basically, he has a bolt gun and he's like killing his animals over and over again. He essentially kind of becomes desensitized to it, and during one of these sessions of him doing it, he like zones out and then finds himself like in an alternate dimension where he's like stuck in some kind of like slaughterhouse maze, right? Instead of the abduction of Tom Hahn. Or yeah. I don't think so. I think this is the first time Tom was brought up. But yeah, who knows what Tom is? Tom could be some other kind of entity or avatar of some sort. But yeah, like he goes through this maze. He's like stuck there for a long time and is like seeing all these various things slaughtered and the smell of it, and seeing this like red, like hazed overworld like sky, and you know, hearing his creature slaughtered and the machines going in this like pit of like rotten and slaughtered bodies of various creatures and humans. And like the overall theme of it was like, you know, when you've been working in a slaughterhouse like that, like seeing humans as anything else other than animals as well, and everything is just like sacks of living meat and moving meat, you know, kind of a thing. But he ends up also having this moment where like, I think he sees Tom like just sitting there like using this bolt gun and just bolting himself over and over and over again, and then eventually the statement giver like puts the bolt gun to his head to put him out of his misery as like a mercy killing. You know, which is basically like the theme of it is humans are just animals like them, and it's, you know, to these entities it's the same thing, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's slaughtering of, you know, animals or people, it's all the same to them. So interesting episode. The first hunt, I think I'm gonna give this one an S tier. I really liked this episode. This is the first episode that actually happens in America, out in Virginia. The statement giver is a hunter, and through various the liminal space slaughterhouse was messed up, very much so. It definitely was very much like a backrooms slaughterhouse experience. It was very grotesque. For me so far, this is probably like the most grotesque episode was Killing Floor. But episode 31, the statement giver is like a hunter, and through like an online chat room of some sort, he ends up making friends with another guy in America. The guy in America invites him out to go on a hunt over there. So he flies out, they get all geared up, meet each other for the first time, and they go out in the wilderness. And when they're out in the wilderness trying to hunt you know, some elk, they hear, you know, some dude whistling or singing "Hunting We Will Go," and this strange random person comes out of nowhere and just has a conversation with them, and kind of grins, and they get like this strange creepy feel from him, and then the next thing they know, they're essentially getting hunted. The statement giver has his sights set up to about shoot a deer or an elk or something like that, and then he hears some kind of shots, and the person that he had went out there with had disappeared. He ends up finding their body, and you know, there's, you know, a bullet hole in his chest, I think, and he's dead. And then he ends up seeing this creature or this person turn into like essentially kind of like a werewolf and start chasing him down. And so he ends up running for his life throughout, you know, the evening and into the night, with this, you know, werewolf creature chasing him down, and ends up bringing him back to the body of the dead, his dead hunting partner. But luckily the man, I think, was in the military and had some training, and he was smart. Another one of the guys that him and the dude from Do Not Open are the two guys that really kind of outsmart these entities and come out on top through just like smarts and sheer will and determination. But he ends up like feigning that he's more tired than he is, than he is to like get this werewolf creature to like take its time to go after the final, you know, kill. And when he does, he dodges it and like trips him, and he picks up his gun, unloads the entire clip into him, and then his partner's gun is on the ground too, unloads the entire clip in him as well. The injuries don't, you know, kill this werewolf creature, but it slows him down enough to where he can escape, and he ends up getting picked up by like park rangers. So yeah, good episode, very good episode of essentially kind of, it was basically like the Magnus Archives version of the movie Predator is kind of what I equate it to. You know, these guys that are hunters and seem to be professionals at doing so, have great experience, are being hunted by another entity, and you know, the statement giver has to use essentially his mind to outwit a superior enemy to defeat him. So great episode, great episode. Episode 32, The Hive. This is another S tier one. This is, I believe this is the one where we hear Prentice's statement, if I'm correct, right? So this is essentially, there's not really a whole lot to share about this, but this is just like really gets you into the mind of Jane Prentice and what's going on with her, and kind of her fall into madness as she's been corrupted by the maggots. Magnets, but it was a very good episode to see things from her perspective, and to also see kind of John react to it at the end with everything that's been going on. So another good one. Episode 33, Bosun's Call, right? Is 33 or 30? Hard to tell. Yeah, episode 33, Bosun's Call. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a B. Actually, I thought this was, actually, you know what? I'll probably drop this one down to C. This reintroduces the Lucas family into this one. Yeah, and what the hell the hive in her attic was, right? Yeah, she was obsessed with like this wasp hive in her attic. And that's also kind of an interesting thing, right? Like, there are episodes that are bug related that don't have anything to do with the maggots. You know, like she saw a wasp hive, but then gets infested by these maggots. The other guy saw those maggots, but then he kept seeing this spectral spider that he like felt compelled to kill, you know? So I wonder what kind of tie-in there is with that. So yeah. But yeah, episode 33, Bosun's Call, we get introduced back to the Lucas family again. And really, I think the overall idea with this episode is to kind of show that the Lucas family has more overall like global reach. They seem to have far-reaching hands. I think also in the previous episode alone, it stated at the end of that the Lucas family are patrons to the Magnus Archives, so they help pay the bills around the Magnus Archives. And I think it was mentioned that Elias, the like overall person that runs the Magnus Archives, doesn't like it when John and others start digging into things with the Lucas family. So having them show up again here is interesting. The statement is essentially about a sailor. I wouldn't say dock worker, but essentially a sailor. She gets off of another ship that might have been doing some criminal activities and doesn't want to be associated with them. So she books passage on another ship, and the ship is captained by Peter Lucas, and ship is very strange. No one seems to be cheery or happy. No one's really talking to each other or really attached to each other. And one night after they've been out to sea for a while, everyone gets into this rowboat except for one of the crew members. And they all row out away from the boat. This bosun signals, blows his whistle. A fog rolls in that covers all of them. You can hear some kind of like people crying and sniffing and some sadness from the crew members. Eventually it all goes away. They get back on the boat, and then everything seems to be back to normal, except for the one crew member who didn't join in the boat has disappeared. And eventually that person's body ends up washing up on shore, like 5 days or a week later, something like that. And so after that happened, though, the crew seems lively and happy and everyone's talking, but they don't want to make mention of the person who seemed to have been off. So some very strange and interesting things, you know, happening, and the Lucas family seems to be involved, and they seem to have far-reaching, you know, hands here. So yeah, and they also paid the statement giver very well. I think like 25,000 pounds for like only a few days worth of work. It was basically kind of like, you did your job and don't say anything, here's some money. So anatomy class, I'll put this one up in A. This was a very creepy episode, where a teacher essentially is, you know, signed up to give an anatomy class, and he's giving a class to a bunch of seemingly strange people. He doesn't seem to remember exactly what they look like. He can kind of piece together some of their clothing, but the weird thing is they're all from different ethnicities supposedly, and all of them are like John Doe names for those different ethnicities, right? Like John Doe is the name that's given in America for an unknown person, and all of them have names of unknown persons from different countries. So yeah, and all of them are like very fascinated in anatomy and the lessons, but like as he's given lessons, it seems like they're trying to essentially learn how to copy being human as much as possible. Like he's giving a lesson on the lungs and how breathing works, and then once he does that, he starts to hear them breathing where he didn't notice they weren't breathing before. He gives them a class on bones and how bone length and things like that and density and stuff works, and starts hearing a bunch of pops and cracks, and then afterwards all of them are actually different heights than what they were before. And then he gives them a class on how the heart works and how it pumps, and then they each kind of hold up a part, they each hold up a heart, and they start, you know, the heart starts working, and each one pumps the heart in a different way, and he tells them which one is the proper way. So like they're like trying to mimic what it is to be human as much as possible. And then he eventually goes to confront them. They all seem to mysteriously live at the same house. He goes to confront them at the house because he just has to know what's going on with them. And one of them opens the door. They have a very strange, odd smile that isn't the kind of smile that a human would give, and he hears like some muffled screams or something going on, like they're dissecting someone. And then he basically just runs away, and the woman that opened the door is creepily staring at him the whole time. So the only thing I could think of is maybe that these entities or whatever might also have a tie-in with the earlier episode Thrown Away. That's where all the teeth is, because they gave him an apple with a bunch of teeth in it as like a thank you gesture for him teaching them the class. So I don't know. It's a very strange episode, but an interesting one. Also possibly the story. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking I might be right about that. I never knew what the hell was going on in that episode my first time through. Yeah, that's the only tie-in I can think of would be from that. Episode 35, Old Passages. This I'm gonna give an S tier. I really like this episode. This we actually get kind of a glimpse of Jürgen Leitner himself and what was going on with him. This statement was the statement giver, like, was talking about the statement kind of going back from like even in the 80s, and I think there was also some kind of heart involved in Thrown Away. Didn't think the heart they looked through went missing. Yeah, I think he said like one of them was thrown across the room, and he tried to bring someone else in there to like confirm that it was there, and it was gone. And the only like evidence might have been some specks of blood, but he didn't know if it was from that or something else. I think something like that, you know. But yeah, so Old Passages. This we see Jared Key again as a young teenager, a little goth teenager, you know. But even then, he seems to have supernatural strength and abilities far beyond what's going on with him. And so in the story, the statement giver has like some kind of architecture business, They do like remodeling of old homes and things like um, structures that they want that are like old that they want to keep in, you know, working order, and old homes and things like that. Um, so in the 80s, I guess like 87, I think is what the statement said. Jurgen Leitner wanted to have some additions added to the house that he had owned, and he wanted basically like a basement dug. But I guess he didn't actually own the property. He was just like renting or leasing the property, and so they said they couldn't do it without getting permission of the owner. And yeah, he ended up like throwing him out essentially. And then I guess years later they're working on something, you know, this a similar, I think it was the same place. And you know, him and the woman that he worked with and another guy, they were just kind of sitting there having a discussion on like a coffee break or something. And then Jared just shows up out of nowhere. They kind of are startled by it because this kid comes out of nowhere, and he asks if they found anything yet. They don't really understand what he's talking about, and he seemingly just runs into the room, grabs a sledgehammer, and opens up a wall to a passage that they were unsure of. And he runs into the passage. They chase after him. I don't remember the other guy's name that was with the statement giver, but he chases after Jared. The woman that he was having a conversation with goes to try to get the police to get help. And then the statement giver chases after Jared and the other guy that was there with them. And it ends up leading to a passage with like 13 other passages. And there's like a stone in the middle of this passage with a date and the name like Robert Smirk or something like that on it. And who in the setting, I guess, was like someone who was known for their architecture and building churches and things like that. And it seems like these different passages might be involved with different entities that are going on in the Magnus Archives. One gave him like this like distorted, dizzying kind of feeling, similar to I think what the table in Graham's episode did, that statement giver. One also gave him kind of like the feeling of like sinking and falling. Another one gave him this like feeling of utter darkness and alone. But yeah, so then like Jared runs out of one of these tunnels with the book, seemingly the book that his mother ends up getting. And the other gentleman that was with him doesn't come back. He goes down there to find out what happened, and they see his body. And so also throughout the episode, there's like more history about Robert Smirk, and this building used to be some kind of club that he ran or was a part of. And so the structure was built underneath it, and this was like prior to World War II. So potentially there could have been some kind of occult club happening underneath there where they were maybe doing some kind of weird rituals. World War II happened. The building gets blown up, but the structure underneath is fine and intact. And however many years later, you know, Leitner wants, you know, things dug to it. It doesn't happen. And then whatever other building is there now, they end up like finding because Jared knows how to go. So it was a very fascinating episode, bringing Jared back while also building a lot more of the lore of the world. They did mention that Smirk seemed to pop up a lot in the cult circle. Yeah. And he had retired, I think, from doing architecture, but was always willing to come out of retirement to build churches. So it seems like he was wanting to like spread some more of whatever religion was going on here, right? So episode 36, Taken. Which one was what was this one? I'm trying to remember what Taken was. Which one is this? You remember what Taken was about? I'm trying to think of, was this also starting more with Prentice? Can't remember. Prentice, whatever. Interest. What was Taken about? As soon as I see it, I know I'll remember. I should have brought up the transcript from this. Apologize for waiting here, but Oh, taken ill. Okay. Okay. Just because it was just the name. Okay. I thought it said taken like 3 there on this. Okay, no, it's taken ill. Okay, I get it. This is with the elderly home. Yeah, this was the crazy elderly home one. I got you. That's why I was like taken. The only thing it made me think of was the Liam Neeson movie. I'll put this up in A. I like this episode. This was a very creepy episode for sure. This is another creepy one. The statement giver works at a mortuary home. Essentially, her uncle owns it, and they get called to go to this, elderly care home, Ivory something or other, I think, right? Ivory Meadows. That's what it is. And so, like, they get a call to go there, and the place seems strange. There's strange smell going on in there. There's new management, and the person that runs the place is a very like tall, creepy man who has a fly land in his eyeball and walks across his eye, and he doesn't flinch. I'm already out of there at that point. But yeah, they come for the body of this elderly person who's passed, and it seems like there's some kind of, this is like a very Warhammer 40k Nurgle episode where it seems like some kind of disease ran through this guy. And the caretaker of the place is trying to be like, oh, it's fine. The disease isn't contagious. It's fine. We're fine. And there's like flies flying all over him. And there's like open wounds with like weird pus and ooze coming out of this body. I for sure would have been like, I'm calling the police and the CDC. We need to quarantine this because this is definitely some weird stuff going on here. But they end up taking the body, bringing it back to the mortuary home. And the uncle seemingly knows something is going on. He gets a phone call, I think, from the caretaker, and he basically says like he's gonna take care of it. And statement giver and her brother, who is her partner in this job, are basically told to not worry about it. He's gonna take care of it. They burn the body immediately, put it into a simple brass, container, and send it back to the elderly home. They get a second call from the nurse, one of the nurses that worked there. It basically sounds like she says that they're dying and they need help. They, against her best interests, end up going back there again, and the place is even worse. She hears some like tapping coming from a window. She goes around to the window to see the nurse who called, basically in the same condition with all these like sores and green pus and stuff coming out of her, and she like screams, and like all these flies start buzzing out of her mouth. And then this old man and another woman basically tackle the statement giver, asking her who she is, etc. And then they basically seemingly burn the place down. From John's statement at the end, supposedly there was a gas line malfunction, and it caused the place to go up in flames. But yeah, again, seemingly more going on about potentially people working against certain entities. Going back to the episode Old Passages, it seems like from actions that Jared has had in the various episodes that he might be trying to work against some of these entities and prevent some of these entities from doing things to people. I don't know. So yeah, John Amherst. I don't think we got the names. I don't know there. Yeah, I don't think we got the names of the old man and the woman. But yeah, they seem to have been working against whoever is here with us. So yeah, episode 37, Burnt Offerings. I'm gonna put this one at C. This one had some more interesting lore stuff, but it was, I don't know, there wasn't really a whole lot to this episode. Essentially, a guy who's working up in like the northern part of Scotland, like deep in the Highlands, where there isn't any kind of civilization. He's like surveying some land, comes across a strange like clearing that isn't natural, and it seems like was built there by people. The way the trees were set up, they had to have been planted there on purpose. He steps into the clearing, and then like seems to be cursed. and like the water's in him's the water in his canteen is boiling. He goes drink it, burns himself. He sees a lot of like burned animal bodies around, seemingly like animals like might have stepped into the clearing and then been burned and run out and died from their wounds. The only real interesting thing about this is that there's like stakes put into these trees, and there's different seemingly offerings in these bottles that have water in them, and on each of the bottles I believe there were photos of Gertrude Robinson, who was the previous Magnus Archives head. She was the previous John. So there's some kind of connection. Someone tried to put a curse or a hit out, it seems, on Gertrude. And then the rest of the statement givers, basically he offed himself by setting himself on fire because he was extremely worried about something happening to his son after something had happened to his wife. We can only assume that they were probably burned alive somehow, as other weird things started happening to him, with like car overheated and other things were burning up around him. So seemingly he was cursed to like burn things. So very strange. Episode 38, Lost and Found. I'll give this one a B. This was another interesting episode that kind of goes back to like that spiral pattern from the table. The statement giver seems to be an antiquities dealer and might also be potentially at times dealing with criminal elements to get some of these antiquities and buying them off of them. And so he, gets some kind of vase seemingly from like the Ming Dynasty, a very old vase with a strange pattern on it. And Salesa, who's the dealer he got it from, doesn't seem to remember giving him, this vase. He wasn't charged for it when he bought other things from, the statement giver wasn't charged for it when he bought other things from Salesa. Yeah. And so, that worries him. He thinks that, Salesa's trying to like pull a fast one on him, but as they're having a conversation, it doesn't seem to be the case. And over time, various important possessions from the statement giver seem to be disappearing. A book, shoes, a tunic, things that he has, a lot of sentimental value or potentially value that he's trying to sell, etc., keep disappearing. And then, he remembers them, but everyone else around him doesn't seem to remember them at all. His husband, he tries to tell him about various things that are missing. His husband's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen these things. You've never had these things, etc. And so, yeah. The theme of it seems to kind of be like the horror of like, is what you're remembering real? Is it not real? Are you losing your mind? Are you getting dementia? Kind of things. And there have been other stories that kind of play into that tie-in as well. But in the end, he spends a night where he just like stares at the patterns in this vase and eventually falls asleep, only to wake up to all of his possessions being given back, and seeing some kind of like creepy hand going back into the vase. And then his husband has disappeared, never to be seen from again. And I think the vase disappears as well. So seems like some kind of entity is living in there that's snatching stuff. So did you realize what was going on? Yeah. So good episode. Infestation. This one is easily an S tier. This is probably my favorite episode of season 1 and my favorite episode, so far with the Magnus Archives. This is building up to the climax of the season where, John is getting ready to give some kind of statement. He sees a spider, interestingly enough, and, goes to, kill the spider with a book, smacks it, breaks like a shelf, and then this wall collapses to some kind of tunnel that leads down below the Magnus Archives, and all of these worms start flooding out after them. And then we start getting recordings from different perspectives from various characters, from John, from Martin, from Tim, from Sasha, from things that are happening and going on as they're essentially being assaulted and overrun by Jane and these worms. And we get some more character development from John and Martin. They have this kind of heart-to-heart conversation, and we start to learn more about John and what's going on with him, and Martin and what's going on with him and why he works there. And then we also have Sasha, who seems to have been, snatched. She ends up, you hear a recording of her going through the archive storage area and how she used to work there initially, and it creeped her out, so she got transferred to another part of the Magnus Archives, and she sees something, and then we hear some kind of static and a loud like whine noise, and then someone seemingly trying to mimic Sasha's last statements. So it seems like Sasha had gotten snatched in some kind of way, shape, or form. And then eventually Elias, the head guy, ends up tripping the new CO2 fire extinguisher system they have there, and ends up killing all the worms and seemingly Jane in the process. So Elias comes and saves the day. So that was Infestation. Very good episode. And again, it was much more of a radio drama episode than kind of just like a podcast episode. This was definitely more of a radio play, the different characters interacting with each other and talking with each other, and things going back and forth, and really getting a sense of the emotion and drama of what was going on. So great episode. And then episode 40, Human Remains. I'm gonna give this one, this is like A+ to S-, but I'll put this up in S. I like this one as well, just because it answers some questions, but then also adds a lot more to the mystery. The threat of Jane has passed. Her and the worms have been subdued. They're kind of recovering from the situation, and John's trying to take everyone's statements, and he straight up asks, Elias, what happened to Gertrude? Because apparently, in the previous episode, when they were down in the tunnels, Martin, Tim, and John were together, and eventually they got separated because they were attacked by some worms, which also, that's something else that should be mentioned, which I think is only mentioned in this episode 42, was that seemingly the worms underneath in the tunnels were much faster and more aggressive than the ones in the actual archives itself, seeming to give the idea that something in the Magnus Archives, institute, place, headquarters, whatever, was like suppressing them, slowing them down, maybe distorting their connection to each other, so they weren't quite so cohesive. And it's also interesting that in episode 39, the voice of Jane that we hear, she says, "Do you hear their song?" Something along those lines. So it almost kind of indicates, again, a Warhammer 40k reference, kind of like a Tyranid psychic connection between her and all of these creatures. And, maybe something in the Magnus Archives is disrupting that connection. They're not able to be, they're not able to be at peak performance, essentially. So, but yeah, so seemingly, when they got separated, Martin found the body of Gertrude Robinson in some kind of room. He seemed to have been wandering around underneath the archives for hours, I think he said. Perhaps, maybe the maze entity of something like that also has something down there. But he eventually, meet Gertrude. She seemed to have been slumped over with 3 bullets in her chest. I think they said as well in the episode that she had been recording statements. So I don't know if that means there's tapes there for them to listen to, or not. That wasn't something that was made very kind of clear, or maybe it's something that I missed. I don't know. But yeah, so they find the body of Gertrude. From what Elias' statement says, the only thing that they ever saw from Gertrude was he went to her desk at one point to go talk with her about something, and they just found blood everywhere. There was like over a gallon of blood, and it was apparently from the DNA testing her blood. So I don't know. It seems like something more was going on there at the Magnus Archives, and they're adding more of the mystery to, you know, what's going on here. So I guess we'll see, I guess, you know, in season 2, hopefully we'll get some more answers as to what happened with Gertrude, etc. So I guess to give my final thoughts on the season, I've really enjoyed it so far. I've enjoyed the underlying tones. I was very suspicious of Gertrude earlier on, just because of that dream episode with all the tendrils like coming off her or going to her. It made me think that maybe she was involved with one of these eldritch entities, because it almost, the story almost made it seem like these tendrils were coming off of her, and so like anything that she may have been in contact with was dying. Maybe she was absorbing their energy or something like that. But made me think that maybe she had some kind of hand in something going on with some of these entities. But I guess that doesn't seem to be the case. I'm very suspicious of Elias right now, though, just because, you know, he's the head of the Magnus Institute. I would assume he's been there the longest. He's worked with other people. I believe he said that he'd worked with other people before Gertrude was even there. So there have been other, you know, head archivists or even Gertrude. And so the reason I'm suspicious of him, right, like when Tim was giving his statement, I think in episode 40, he had mentioned that it seemed like the wall that he broke through to get to John and Martin was just like plastered over. So it very much seems like someone knew about these tunnels and they just kind of plastered them over to make it seem like they weren't a part of the building, that they didn't go anywhere. But also there has to be other entrances and exits to get in there, because Jane had found her way down there, and it seemingly she was, you know, breeding these maggots to, you know, go up and overwhelm and kill Jonathan. John seemed to be her main target, but probably everyone up there. And also Jane was also destroying written down statements as well. So that's also very fascinating. And during Jane's statement, the episode where she was giving a statement, you know, she seemed to have, I think she seemed to have mentioned something about these entities not wanting to be seen, wanting to remain in the dark, you know, in the dark corners of everything. So it could be that she's wanting to destroy some of these statements so that anything that could allude to the entities that were dealing with her or whatever that she represented wouldn't be known and could be more hidden. But I'm very suspect of Elias because, again, he's worked there the longest, and it seems like maybe, like, you would think he would know about those tunnels potentially. I mean, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't. But someone working there seemingly would have had to have, you know, plastered up those walls. And it's more than one wall, obviously, because, again, the wall that John broke through when he was killing that spider, which, coincidence, you know, I feel like there's going to be something more with that, potentially. But, yeah, you know, he basically just smacked the shelf fell apart, and the wall fell apart too. So it wasn't done very well, you know. Very specific statement, which I unfortunately don't remember the names of. Yeah. Like maybe one was Strange Music. Might have been. But yeah, I'm just very suspect of him at the moment, just because, you know, he's the guy that runs everything. You would think he would know about these tunnels, and he would have let people know that, hey, these things have been plastered up. But because he didn't mention anything about that, and because they found Gertrude's body down there, it would make me think. I mean, I don't know if Martin or Sasha or Tim or any of them had like worked with Gertrude before, right? Or not. But even so, even if not, right? Like, seemingly someone killed Gertrude and dumped her body down there, or went in through those tunnels, plastered them up again so they couldn't find their way out, and maybe just trapped her down there. You know, I one of my theories is that maybe the hunt entity was hunting Gertrude down there, because it seems like there's a maze. So maybe this is an instance where a couple of entities were working for the downfall of Gertrude, because maybe she was getting into too much. They threw her down there. A maze, was made. Keep her wandering around while this hunt entity went after her, and then she eventually kind of just gave up in this room and it ended up killing her. I don't know. So strange music and distortion are the missing tapes. Gotcha. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm pretty suspicious of Elias right now. And then of course I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Sasha moving forward, because obviously she got body snatched. They mentioned in the credits at the end of not Sasha, who's played by another voice actress. So I mean, yeah, is Sasha gonna like appear out of something? I think she was near the table from Graham's episode when this creature attacked her. So it's like, is she trapped in this table? Is she gonna get out somehow? Are they gonna discover that this imposter Sasha is an imposter and somehow deal with her, which will release other Sasha? Will Sasha somehow get out and there'll be two of them, and then they have to figure out who's the imposter and who's not? I don't know, but I'm very interested to see, what's gonna happen moving forward in season 2. So I mean, like right now, Elias is on my suspect, list, and I'm just curious to see what's gonna happen with Sasha. So, I mean, so there you go. That's my tier list episode, and that's, I guess my overall review of the episode so far, and what I'm looking forward to moving forward for season 2. So I mean, I guess, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you agree with my tier list? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of you out there that'll move a lot of these things around. And like I said, there's really not any episodes of the Magnus Archives that I don't dislike. The ones down here in C just kind of seem to be maybe, I guess, slower episodes, or episodes that don't necessarily seem to have big connection to the overall story and don't really seem to have any kind of other impact on anything, at least right now. Maybe in other future episodes that will change. But yeah, S tier episodes are definitely my favorite episodes. And I mean, most of the episodes from A and B probably could be interchanged with each other, but I just think the episodes in category A had a bit more of an impact, or I just remember a lot more than the previous ones. So yeah, that's gonna do it for here, guys. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tier list episode. I will probably do this again at the end of each season. I know this is a very long one. Well, it was a longer episode here for me than what I normally do. But yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments about these, about where I've placed my tiers here. I will zoom in a little bit further so you guys can see a little bit better here on screen. In the S category, we have Do Not Open, Father's Love, Lost John's Cave, Bone Turner's Tale, Confession, Desecrated Host, Colony, Distortion, First Hunt, Hive, Old Passages, Infestation, and Human Remains. Those are my S tier. A, we have Anglerfish, Across the Street, The Piper, Burned Out, Vampire Killer, Dreamer, First Aid, Alone, Piecemeal, Schwarzwald, Skin Tight, Cheating Death, Anatomy Class, and Taken Ill. Under B, we have Page Turner, Squirm, Arachnophobia, Man Upstairs, Free Fall, Growing Dark, Sturdy Lock, Killing Floor, and Lost and Found. And under C, we have Thrown Away, Strange Music, Bosun's Call, and Burnt Offering. And none under D, because I don't really think, honestly, any of them were worthy of that. So maybe in the future some will happen. Who knows? But I mean, yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where would you move where, etc.? But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Links will be down below to the Magnus Archives playlist, the Rusty Quill Podcast YouTube channel, and to their website. As always, go to their website, go to their YouTube channel. Like any videos that you've enjoyed of theirs, be sure to hit that sub button on their channel to give them some love and support. If you want to give them some extra love and support, go to their website, go to their Patreon. Check out other kind of ways that you can give them some love and support through that means. You can do the same thing for my channel if you'd like to. There's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description. The YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer, so you can check those out if you would like. If you want to give my channel some extra love and support, Regardless, thank you guys just very much for coming in and hanging out, checking out the video, especially if you are watching the video here all the way to the end. I know this is a longer one, but I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate you, watching all the way through. I appreciate all the love and support. The channel's been growing a lot lately. We're at an all-time high with subs. We're on an all-time high with members. So thank you guys truly for all the love and support. Thank you doesn't feel adequate enough. I'm just a guy here that, makes recordings and gives my thoughts and opinions on things that I find interesting. So, I greatly appreciate all the love and support. And with your help, I'm getting to that dream of being able to potentially do this, for a living, which is what I would love to do. Be able to, do YouTube and gaming stuff for a living. So thank you guys very much. I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one. Have yourselves a wonderful evening.